The opinions of the commentator or commentators are solely those of the commentators and not of CJAD 800 or Bell Media.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome to today's Entrepreneur. This is brand new for me. Josh Miller here from Fuller Landau. Dan Delmar is not here this evening. So for the first time since December 2009, Dan has missed the show, but for a good cause because he is volunteering at the Table of Hope this evening at the Windsor Station. So the best to you, Dan, and I'm sure you look really pretty in that apron that you're going to wear. So here I am, and I'm joined by my partner, the managing partner of Fuller Landau, Michael Newton. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Josh.
Mike has been in the seat before on various occasions when I haven't been able to make it. So everybody is pretty much familiar here what to do, maybe with slightly my exception. But I got it figured out. And as we do every week, we talk about news. We have a great entrepreneur to highlight this evening. This week's entrepreneurs, of course, as some people heard on the radio, is Natalie Riviere of Virtual Resources. So welcome, Natalie, to the show.
Thank you so much.
And before we get into Natalie's story and the great advice that she's going to give during her segment, let's get into some news of the week, Mike. And there's always lots that happen. And so let's just kind of start off with people looking for money. Now, people looking for money, they can go to private equity, they can go to venture capitalists. There's certainly some that focus on startups. There's some that focus on more mature businesses. I know that in the Financial Post recently, there was a story of venture capitalist VCs looking at Canadian startups. It's actually an Ontario pension fund or an offshoot. Right. That is looking to. What's your take, for entrepreneurs, if they should be looking, or what should they be wary about when dealing with private equity or venture capitalists?
Well, many times I think people confuse private equity and venture capital. Venture capital is really a subdivision of private equity. And really the whole concept of private equity in the family business environment is relatively new to the Canadian marketplace. And it really hasn't taken off yet. I think a lot of the entrepreneurs that are part of it are part of our business environment are very concerned about what private equity brings to the table, loss of control and everything else. And one of the things certainly within the private equity market is this desire to take control or 100% of the company, rebuild, modify. And the big difference between private equity and VC generally is private equity is taking an established company. VC is usually coming in under some form of chaos or in a startup environment, and they don't always need to take a 50% stake. But either way, both are looking to make some money on some major changes and flip. They're not looking to stay for years.
Now, for entrepreneurs, I mean, they're maybe not used to the formality of all the processes and getting the numbers and everything, but I presume they really got to, cross their T's and dot their I's when they're dealing with professionals like this. Yeah,
the private equity in the VC market is dealing with ex-bankers. So you're dealing with people that are very familiar with the financial services spectrum. The hard part for a lot of entrepreneurs is, as you said, their businesses are not formal. So they haven't really had over the years this very structured environment. And one of the things that the professional financiers are going to do when they come in is try and make sure that they take advantage of the fact that you haven't been all of that formal. Try and put the structure in place in order to be able to increase the value and then at some point in the future flip it and turn it around.
Now let's jump to another topic. We've spoken about this before in the past couple of years, and that is online retailing. There was a story in the Financial Post again that says Ontario sales are strong in Canada. Businesses and SMEs don't necessarily have the ability or try to keep up. Some of the stats, I mean, this is a Business Development Bank of Canada survey where they said 56% of Canadians shop online, 77% do research before they go out and buy, yet only 12% of SMEs actually offer their service or product online. What's the lesson to be learned?
Well, I think if you're looking, first of all, take the retail space where a lot of the retail stores have really become very elaborate and very large showrooms. I think a lot of people, like you said, are doing their research. They're going to the store where they want to get the tactile side of things and are then proceeding to go back and buy online either at the best price or from the comfort of their own home. And I really think that a lot of the small entrepreneurs really haven't focused on that kind of market space, nor have they also accepted the the changes that come with selling the onesies and the twosies online as opposed to the large shipments. So there's a whole different logistics involved.
Now, for those of you just tuning in, Dan Delmar is not here this evening. He is volunteering his time at the Table of Hope. So you're listening to myself, Josh Miller, which hopefully you're a little bit familiar with, and managing partner of Fuller Landau, Mike Newton. Now, Mike, as we were talking about online, there's still stories out there where they say the online stores are still going to open brick and mortar, still going to open retail store locations. They feel it's a better footprint. We've seen it with Frank and Oak. We've seen it with a number of places that are online. Why would somebody, a retail store takes up a lot more dollars. Online is, certainly more cost efficient. Why would an entrepreneur consider both?
Well, I think we still live in a world where people like to actually touch and see the products that they're buying. So there are certain products that are much more conducive to being in a physical space as opposed to seeing online. I think there's also different segments within the marketplace in terms of comfort dealing online, security issues, and a whole bunch of areas. And for others, like I said earlier, it's a little bit like a showroom. So.
Now, there was another story in Financial Post. Seemed to be a lot of business stories in the Financial Post this week, as they always do. And it was about drastic changes in businesses. It was this company, Blueprint Software Systems, where a new CEO came in and things were, very flat. The people were kind of non-motivated, and he just came in and cleaned house. It was difficult. They were difficult decisions to make, but he truly felt that, if he didn't do something drastic, this company was going downhill and going to be closed really fast. Entrepreneurs have to make difficult decisions all the time. What would be your comments? What would be your best words for the entrepreneur that has to go in and realize that, tomorrow is not going to be very good if you don't fix today?
Well, not to speak to Blueprint, because I don't know the story all that much, but I think they're facing a very common practice, and there's no doubt that businesses that have been around for a long time have a terrible tendency to become complacent and kind of rest on their laurels to a certain degree. And I think in the world we live in today, I think there's always somebody willing to be competitive. The issues that you do end up facing in many cases now is that you've got this international aspect to things. So if you're not going to keep up to date, if you're not going to be online based on what you were talking about before, if you're not going to play in that area, you need to shake things up. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the problems start at the top. So, people go in and they're going to clean house. Well, they got to clean house, and sometimes they got to start right at the top, because the complacency and the comfort levels certainly come from those setting the groundwork.
Now, speaking of international and of course local, the term "made in Canada" is that going to start meaning something soon? I mean, I think we've been hearing some manufacturing coming back, but what does that mean for entrepreneurs?
Well, I think the concept of made in Canada has always been one of quality and definitely something that we've always been proud of. The expectation, I think, certainly will be more and more based on a Canadian specialty product. Not that I'm going to say we're only going to manufacture and export maple syrup, but there's no doubt that Canadian content has some kind of international marketability. If we could get some of the labor costs down a little bit more and get a little more volume, because there's no doubt that the Canadian market space is not enough to absorb its own product. There has to be an international aspect to the products, and I think Canada has done a pretty good job on the international scale at understanding what the world wants. I think our biggest problem at this point is still being Canadians. We're a little too laid back and a little too casual. We're patriotic, but there's no doubt that the essence of what Made in America is meant from a marketing perspective certainly hasn't hit home yet in terms of Made in Canada.
No, and I agree with you completely, not because you're my partner, but because it actually makes sense.
Well, there's always a first.
On air, I control you. So, hey, you got to work with that.
Yes, sir.
I like the term "yes, sir," but absolutely, it's just the question of entrepreneurs becoming that much more efficient with their processes. And when you talk about lean business, lean manufacturing, lean processes, there's no doubt that it has to be at least that. Thanks very much. Coming up after the break, we have Natalie Riviere of Virtual Resources.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to Today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. This is not Dan Delmore with a cold. This is actually Josh Miller sitting in Dan's seat. Michael Newton, our managing partner of Fuller Landau, is sitting in my usual spot. He doesn't fill the chair as much as I do, but that's radio, so you can't really see size difference. In any event, we welcome to the show, to the program, Natalie Riviere from Virtual Resources. Welcome again, Natalie. And as we do with every guest on the show, the first question's a pretty easy one. Well, let's tell the listener exactly what Virtual Resources does.
Perfect. Virtual Resources offers virtual communication resources to businesses. That means if you want to communicate online, we have everything to spread your message externally. So online marketing suite of services. We're talking websites, optimizing websites for search engines, social media, analytics, PR, advertising online, search engine marketing. And then with a website comes a domain name. You need email and you need to collaborate internally. And so we're also a Google Apps for Business and Work partner. And we help coordinate collaboration tools and virtual communication tools within teams.
So I've got two questions for you. One of them we'll come back to in a second, which is this whole discussion of social media and the marketing aspect and getting your message out. The first is, why are you doing what you're doing? What brought you to this? I think you've had a myriad of past activities. You found yourself in a space of marketing, which no doubt is highly competitive. So what brought you here, and what do you see as your main difference?
I got online because while I was studying business for many years, involved in family business, I have this right brain thing going on, and I worked on the side as a makeup artist, and I practiced yoga enough to be certified eventually as a teacher in that. And I sang in a band, and I hung around with these people that all had incredible passion and incredible ideas to help the world, change the world. And I wanted to do that too. I see some room for improvement. And, I realized amongst them that I had a real advantage. I was able to organize myself. I was able to make things happen, I guess, in the arts. And so that's where I started. And people were like, how come you can get people at your shows? How come you can get hired for these gigs? And so I noticed that understanding business was a real pro. And so these are the people I wanted to help. When you're starting off, you really don't have large budgets, and online became the alternative that was affordable. But it's also the place where everybody can raise their voice, everybody can take their space and spread their message. And so it was this two-way form of communication that really excited me from a marketing perspective.
Okay. There's no doubt that social media has carried us into a very new generation of communications. And it's gone from being kind of the friendly, what I did yesterday afternoon or what I'm eating for dinner, to this whole new mode of communication. And I think the aspect that everybody's dealing with is not the fact that they should be in social media or the communication is there, is exactly where to spend their time and their effort. I mean, the old real estate adage was, there are three important things to real estate: location, location, location. I think it's pretty much the same thing here when you're talking about communications via social media. You can't be everywhere. And there's also a few kind of rules of thumb, I guess, at the end of the day that you know better than probably anybody else that I've spoken to on the subject.
And it takes certainly a lot of experience, because the online world is a whole different thing. So when we come back from the break, we'll get Natalie's answer on what makes that a little bit different.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur, inspiring stories from outstanding business people. And we're sitting here with Natalie Riviere of Virtual Resources. And we were talking about social media and the understanding it and the balance between everything. So I know Mike had asked a question before we left, Natalie. Maybe you can kind of come back and talk a little bit about that social media, about the balance, about, what the entrepreneur really kind of has to deal with in that minefield.
Social media is a very large world, and so is the internet. I guess it's this wild, wild web, unregulated. Most people understand social media from a personal perspective. That's great, and that's where you get the what I had for dinner and the selfies and all sorts of things. And people really understand social media from that angle. What I like to talk about is social media from a business perspective. Even if you're your own business, as an entrepreneur working for yourself as a professional, there's ways to have the internet work for you, and social media is one of them. So there would be the ones that I would recommend being on just from a visual identity basis because of the way search engines work. Social media is a really great way to get found in search engines. And then you also need to consider your community, and social media is a great way to get to know them.
But there are a lot of tricks. Maybe you don't want to reveal them on air, but there's a lot of tricks in order to not waste time, energy, and money when you're dealing with the social media sites and how you're going about doing things. And it was one of the things when we had this initial conversation that struck me, because I think most people that go online are just completely overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. And, it's like throwing a net over fish as opposed to trying to shoot fish in a barrel. And people waste so much time and so much energy. Is there a couple of things you might want to give away to anybody that makes a little bit of sense without giving away any top secret?
I'm happy to share, no problem. I would say when you're considering social media, I would look at your habits and what you already do. And I would really encourage people to put the time and energy that they put in social media into their own websites. And so your value online is measured in the size of your traffic and the size of your database, how many email addresses you have. And so ideally, all of your social media efforts would be reinforcing traffic coming to your website and people signing up to your newsletter.
So if I follow that thought through, you're telling me I shouldn't be posting all this information on Facebook, that I should be just posting my links?
Exactly. You should be posting the words, and those updates and the content should all be living on a platform that you own. And so your own hosted website, ideally, and then you take the link from there and share that on social media. So social media becomes a vehicle to get people to your site, and you're benefiting from your content, which is very valuable online, and your efforts.
It's the old adage, Mike, you want to be measured by.
The size of my database?
The size of your database, exactly, DB. So technology has changed drastically throughout the years. I mean, you've been doing this, I think, for about 10 years now. What's been the biggest change that you've had to kind of learn or overcome?
The internet still pretty much works the same way. I mean, social media, especially in business, is new, and it's still something everyone, I think, is figuring out. The biggest change, though, I'd say is apps, mobile apps, and the fact that now so many people experience the web and almost only know it from a mobile perspective.
Well, I think the time and the energy spent again on social media is exhausting and overwhelming for most people. I mean, I think a lot of companies and a lot of firms have kind of banned Facebook or social media access during the day, and I'm not sure that's necessarily the right way to deal with things. I think it's more about trying to set policy and procedure that allows people to continue to communicate, because I think if your people are doing things properly, there's an awful lot of message that can be sent out between 9 to 5.
And beyond 9 to 5, of course, because there's a whole other world that kind of either doesn't sleep or turns the clock upside down, because we're international.
And that's why we keep you off of Twitter.
And that's why you keep me off of Twitter, especially late at night.
That's right.
We are here with Natalie Riviere of Virtual Resources and managing partner of Fuller Landau, Michael Newton. When we come back after the break, we'll talk a little bit more with Natalie, a little bit more how she runs her business and how she kind of found a partner in this whole grand scheme of things. But right now, from the CJAD 800 newsroom, here is Kelly LeParrot.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com. Welcome
back to Today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. I'm Josh Miller, sitting in for Dan Delmar.
And sitting in for Josh Miller, who's sitting in for Dan Delmar.
It's and we have with us, just to keep us on the straight and narrow, Natalie Riviere from Virtual Resources, who's doing a really good job when we're off air, keeping us on our toes and off our mics. So let's get back to the story.
So I'm gonna go back in time a little bit. You said you grew up in a family business and an entrepreneurial family business. I'm sure that had a little bit of an effect on how you run your business today and the things that you saw. And I don't know if you want to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, but I'm sure there's some lessons you learned along the way that you've carried with you. Anything that really stands out in your mind?
Yeah. It definitely influenced me in the sense that I was very, very lucky to witness my father's entrepreneurial process. It's been 26 years now that he's in business. He started off as an artist as well, got pregnant with baby Natalie and needed some more money than he was making at the time. And he's just a really creative person and a really great leader, I think, and person to rally team around him. So I think I learned a lot from that, but I saw him build a business in manufacturing and have lots of inventory and overhead and employees. And I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. When I saw it that way, it was in school when I guess, learned about services and in the community I was in when I saw the needs that they had. It was definitely service-based. And so my approach has really been to avoid overhead and to avoid employees and hire people.
And my father always told me to find myself a service job where I could hang up a shingle and I could support myself and not to carry any inventory. What he didn't tell me is I'd have to work with guys like Josh along the way, even though there's no inventory. So.
And look how happy you are today.
Oh, ecstatic. Natalie, let's take a more serious turn, I guess. Obviously, you started out on your own, and I think now you've kind of moved forward and taken on a partner and have kind of looked at things under a little bit of a different microscope. So maybe you want to share that with our listeners. Yeah,
it's been an evolution. Like, I'm very happy to hire people, but I've always gone with hiring independent people. And so I started off as a consultant in the music industry. When Napster hit, I was with the Donald K. Donald Group and helped them with an online store so they could charge for music and try to bring value back to the art. And very quickly, I realized, the people that I was targeting, and in general, in school, you learn a profession, but you don't learn how to exchange or promote yourself for your expertise. And so everyone kind of needs what I do, especially because I help the small guys or there's entrepreneurs at every level, but a lot of these tools are only available to the really big boxes to just get bigger and bigger. And so targeting artists, which then evolved for me into targeting entrepreneurs, is a very big and open, wide market.
How did you determine pricing? I mean, you're getting into this business. You're dealing with startups. You're dealing with young entrepreneurs. You yourself are kind of getting into it, trying to I presume be somewhat transparent to your customers. How do you figure out how much you sell your time for?
At the beginning, I'd left a contract, and it was my challenge to be able to earn the same amount of money on my own that I had been paid with the company, and teaching yoga and doing makeup made more money than you think. It helped me with my startup in business, go figure. But eventually I convinced the artist to pay me $20 an hour, and then it's grown since then. Still very affordable, and still probably frustrating a lot of people that are independent, because I take the approach more where I'd rather be busy and helping than charging a rate that maybe only a few people could afford.
But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to value. I mean, there's no doubt that your hourly rate is a function of how, a vision, but how much an individual is getting in return. And as you mentioned earlier, that obviously the big guys have a lot more time and significantly deeper pockets to make a mistake. So when you sit down with somebody, when you sit down with a potential client or with a new client, you've got to take the limited amount of money or the limited amount of resources they have and point them in the right direction. What's the first thing you're really looking for when you sit down with a new contact?
What their goals are. And how we're going to be able to measure them. What is it that they really want?
Okay, the concept of measurement is an interesting one, because I think there's no doubt that this is the first very true measurement within marketing and communications that we can actually reach out for on a two-way street from a communication side. Maybe you want to discuss that a little bit, because I think most people that grew up on the marketing side went to Gallup poll or Crop poll or whatever the case is, whereas now you've got the instant measurement tool.
Yeah.
Are you trying to measure your database again?
100%.
Just checking.
I love.
Thank God Dan's back next week.
I love data. I love analytics. I love the numbers that we can get from this. And I love it because it takes opinion out of the conversation. Not that that's bad. It's great to have instincts and ideas. But it's all about, what are you serving and who are you helping and their behavior. And so with the information you can get online and social media and through websites, also newsletters, it's incredible what you can learn.
The old
about your
adage
audience.
is you can manage what you can measure. So when you're measuring, what are you looking for?
It depends if you're asking about social, if you're asking about a website, but generally I'm looking for the opportunities. I'm looking for what people are, like what their behavior is, what they're looking for, what's working. And so same thing with social. It's about taking the time you have and getting the most out of that input. And so the analytics can really reveal where you can do that if you are limited to amount of time to be able to promote yourself or push for sales.
I'm assuming you have to steer and guide people in the right direction, because there's no doubt that what they think is an important measurement tool or an important measurement may not in fact be the case. How much time do you spend in terms of trying to get your new clients together and say, no, you know what, that maybe that's what you think, but really we should be over here? Are people's instincts very good initially, or is there some kind of input that you need to put on the table in order to get everybody up to speed?
I think it's an instinct game up until you get set up with these tools. It's not easy to get this information. You know, you have to set up all these tools and be feeding them. The internet is a living thing. It's like a plant. It needs to be watered. Same thing with social media. So a lot of time is spent just setting up. And then once people start using them, sometimes they get so busy that they're not interested in growth or where the next opportunities are always. So analytics is something that we really value. We end up using it in our coaching. That's how we serve people ongoing. We always bring the analytics to the table. And then, they generally speak for themselves. So it's great to have the ideas and the instincts and what you want to do, but it's even better when it's backed by data.
You're dealing a lot, small businesses and startups as part of your clientele. No doubt in Montreal, there's plenty of incubator places and people really needing to get going. What do you do from that aspect? Kind of a community give back to that entrepreneur. What's worked for you, or what I guess drives you in that respect?
Well, I think my whole business started from realizing that people aren't learning this in school. And so I'm very happy to help to the best of my ability. And I have a beautiful network now of people helping me service and fill this gap.
Dawson in particular, you've been working with?
Well, that's it. I sought out the schools because I can do as much as I can, but I'll never be able to help everyone. And so the problem really starts in school. That's where people need to learn. You don't need a master's in business, but you just need to learn professionalism. What is that language? What is this culture? How, it started with barter, and now we have money between us, and it's still barter, but 7 billion people wide, and we're all just exchanging what we're here for and communicating what we're here for. And so just to learn how to exchange and communicate what you do, for me, is professionalism. And the Lester B. Pearson School Board was doing a really great job for elementary and high school, and Dawson College was pushing really hard with entrepreneurship.
That's so much to learn from you, Natalie. I know we're kind of coming up to our next stage. Please stick around. Coming up after the break, we have Mr. Ernie Furt, tax partner at Fuller Landau. Talk a little bit. He'll keep us entertained with his tax knowledge, as much as anyone can with tax knowledge. And we'll come back with our one piece of advice for today's Entrepreneur by Natalie.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur. This is Josh Miller sitting in for Dan Delmar, and Michael Newton, managing partner of Fuller Landau, sitting in my usual spot tonight, here with Natalie Riviere of Virtual Resources. And we bring into the program Mr. Ernie Furt, another tax partner, another partner in our office that specializes in tax. Welcome to the program again, Ernie.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to pay attention and see if Ernie was paying attention. So, and this is something I never thought I'd say anywhere, but we're going to play Test the Taxman. So we had some topics earlier in the evening discussing online retailing made in Canada and foreign investment for private equity and VCs. So those are going to be the topics for the next couple of minutes. So I know you like to talk tax. And I think you talk tax in your sleep. So maybe let's turn the mic over to Ernie and go on the online tax implications.
Well, it depends where you're selling online. If you're selling online in Canada, you have to do some registration for GST, for sure. You have to charge HST, because HST and GST are synonymous. And you may have to register for some provincial sales taxes. In the States, you have to take a look and see if you have nexus in those states, which is a connection to the state, and you may or may not be forced to charge the varying sales taxes by jurisdiction. And it also depends who you're selling to in the states, because the rules are different. When you're selling to consumers, then you have to charge the U.S. sales tax. If you're selling to businesses, if you're selling B2B, you don't have to.
So I'll dumb it down for all us listeners, including myself. Basically, if we're selling online and we're doing online retailing, just call Ernie.
Pretty much.
Is that the safe bet? All right, perfect. Let's go on in terms of exporting. So let's discuss export, GST, QST. I mean, there's a number of questions that come our way on a regular basis about I'm importing goods from China, I bring them into Canada, I'm using them in the manufacturing process, I'm shipping them out, I'm paying duty, I'm paying tax, I'm paying all kinds of stuff. Where does it end? What do I do? Where do I go from here?
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. That's all I got for now.
I just wanted to check if that was all.
I had to take a deep breath.
Absolutely. Okay, let's start with importing stuff to Canada. When we import stuff to Canada, we're going to be paying duty, and we're going to be paying GST on top of the duty included price. Now, that's usually charged by the customs broker and is charged to the importer of record when the goods come across into Canada. So you're going to pay the GST there, you're going to pay it to the customs broker, you're going to claim that back if you're in business, and then you're going to continue doing your process back at your manufacturing concern or warehouse. Now, when you're exporting, you're not going to be necessarily charging the GST. You just have to watch for the other sales taxes in other jurisdictions. If you're exporting outside of the country, you're not going to charge GST at all unless the stuff is picked up here. You just have to be able to watch on your online sales where you're selling them to and prove that the goods were actually shipped there. And if you prove that the goods were shipped there by bill of lading, by FedEx receipt, whatever it may be, then you're charging tax based on the proper destination.
So that sales office or showroom I have in New York or the warehouse that I have in California, is there any implications?
You have to be careful. Those two states are fun. They're probably the highest tax states in the United States. California, you probably have nexus with a showroom. New York State, if memory serves, I think you can be in New York State for under a week and you'll be okay. But if you're there for more than a week, then that sales showroom creates nexus for New York state law, not necessarily federal tax law, because that's governed by the Canada-U.S. tax treaty that says a showroom is not necessarily a permanent establishment. So you have different rules depending on where you're going.
Clearly fascinating tax law, but actually it's a huge minefield that entrepreneurs, when they're selling online, selling internationally, just have to know these things. We are here with Ernie Furt, tax partner at Fuller Landau, and going to take a break. When we come back afterwards, we're going to get Natalie Riviere's one piece of advice on today's entrepreneur, coming up on 7:54.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to the remaining moments of today's entrepreneur. And as we kind of continue our little discussion here on tax, international tax for online services, just before we get to Natalie's one piece of advice, Ernie, the online world has gotten that much more sophisticated. Governments need or are trying to keep up with it. Are they insisting on different reporting or records that you have to keep when you're selling online, if you're almost regardless of what you're selling, because people can buy from anywhere?
People can buy from anywhere, and they have to identify where the stuff went. So depending on what you're selling, if you're selling intangible property, they won't necessarily know where the good went to, and sometimes what happens is they'll track it on the basis of the person's payment method. Where are they paying it from, and where is it going? Because it's not like physical goods that there's an address delivery.
No, and then there's also, of course, the IP address, the geolocalization that the government is trying to, or is not trying. They're actually insisting.
They're insisting on there's a form and on the returns that asks you if are you doing any online sales, and you have a transactional website, and so you have to list your websites because they want to ensure that you are in fact paying tax on the sales that you make from that website.
But most entrepreneurs are going to give you the initial reaction of saying, more paperwork, more compliance, I don't have to bother. What's the implication if they don't file?
if you don't file, there's always penalties for failure to file. And some people, if they don't keep adequate records, they could have a bigger problem. And they can get tax assessments, and they can get arbitrary tax assessments that you, at the end of the day, have to start fighting. So, it's better to pay me now than pay me later, and work out the stuff and make sure that you start off correctly and ask the questions first, and don't ask the questions 6 months into your plan.
So there's not necessarily any payment requirement. It really is just a reporting requirement at this point.
At this point in time, there's a reporting requirement.
But as we all know, the government auditors are on the road, and there are many of them. So better plan ahead when you're doing this kind of stuff. Thanks very much, Ernie. And as we come up to the remaining moment of today's Entrepreneur, we turn to our guest as usual and ask Natalie Riviere of Virtual Resources, what would be your one piece of advice for today's Entrepreneur?
I think it's really about sharing your passion, sharing your ideas, and sharing it to the point that you're talking about it and attracting people around these topics, creating conversations around the topics, and that'll help you surround yourself with a great team. Even if you're working on your own as an entrepreneur, I think it's about finding the people that are experts in their field and getting all the help you can. And so surrounding yourself with great people asking for help would be up there for me.
Perfect. Well, I think you hit the first. If you were to ask me my top two, the first one is always passion. The second one is execution. I think a lot of businesses fall down on the inability to execute, an inability to get things done. So I think if you're going to ask me one major issue, make sure you can put your money where your mouth is and get things accomplished.
Well, thank you very much, Natalie, for being with us. Ernie, as always, always insightful. And Mike, for sitting in my chair while I sit in Dan's chair.
They were big shoes.
Thank you. We're measuring our databases once again.